Welcome to the Fine Print, ladies and gentlemen. I'm your host, Caleb Teskey, coming at you with another great guest this morning, afternoon. I don't know what we call this here. But yeah, let's do the housekeeping off the top. I've had some really great guests on the show recently. If you guys didn't catch my interview with Anthony Minetti, he's the owner of the Camden Apothecary Dispensary at Bell Rexall Pharmacy in New Jersey. He has a cannabis company and a pharmacy. So we had a lively discussion about rescheduling the other day, which I thought was fantastic. And I want to thank Anthony for joining me. Also, if you guys didn't catch my interview with Keith Straub from Normal, great interview there. It's one of the first advocacy groups for cannabis in the country. And I really appreciate Keith for joining me on the show. Yeah. Luke Mason from Orem Labs out in Colorado. They had to shut down, unfortunately. But we also had a great discussion about the lab space and, Drew Greco from Green Star Consulting, Josh Sweeter from Infinite Chemical Analysis Labs, another great show, and some stuff that I have coming up on Tuesday, the 4th. I've got Yasha Khan from MCR Labs. I think that's going to be a fantastic interview. I've been talking to Yasha a lot, and he's also been involved in some of the media with Josh. So I think that's going to be a really good interview. And then on Thursday, the 6th, I've got Rad Source coming on to talk about radiation remediation, things like that, and some of their other projects. And then on Sunday, I got my friend Evan Carlson from Lindenville coming on, who works with NEK Broadband, that has been trying to bring internet access to people in rural Vermont here. And I had to reschedule with AC Moon. She's coming on Tuesday, the 11th. Yep. We had a little bit of scheduling trouble, but I'm super excited to have her on too and talk about some of her interactions with law enforcement, the rage she's dealt with, and her work in the cannabis space. And then let me just get my notes up here. I know I got notes for this. There we go. My guest today has appeared on the show a couple of times prior. You know him, you love him, or you don't. And yeah, please, I'm just going to bring him out. It's Lou Rinaldi. Lou, thanks for joining me again today. Yeah.
Yep, Caleb, it's great to be back, but it feels like coming home. It really does. One of the things I love about this show is the wide range that you cover. The broadband accessibility thing for rural areas, that's huge, man. Nobody talks about that. And I really appreciate you chasing down stories that other people would ignore or just think weren't important. So, big thanks for that. I also, just before we even get started, I want to say right off the top, because I know certain people are watching this, I am not an attorney. Anything I say on this show should not be considered legal advice, nor should it be considered financial advice. As long as we got that straight, we're good.
Up. And right. Here's Rudy Nugent. We do love him. And Lou, since it's been so long since I had you on the show, would you mind giving us a quick 5-minute life story for people that don't know anything about you?
I'm gonna no problem. Yeah. It's been a while. Last time I was on the show, you didn't even have that sick intro and outro video by Rodney. So that was
big up to Rodney as well.
Yeah, Michigan. Yeah, big up. So my name is Lou Rinaldi. I live in Connecticut, where I am a medical patient in the state's medical cannabis program. Cannabis entered into my life when I was a teenager, as I'm sure it did for many of us. Has come in and out of my life at various times, depending on what I had going on at that moment. But fast forward to 2018, 2019, that's about the time that I became a medical cannabis patient in the state of Connecticut. And within a month, I would say, I started to have some real concerns. Started, little blips in my head saying something's not quite right here. Something is not the way, what they're saying is not lining up with the reality in a lot of cases. Because I ask questions and I don't get straight answers. And that's, I am a persistent truth seeker. And a lot of people don't like that, especially people that don't want to answer good faith questions, fact finding kind of questions. And I understand, it's tough. It's tough to openly acknowledge in the light of day certain things. And I get why some people have tough reactions to that. But back to the point, I started to do a little bit of digging. Around the same time I was studying data science, I was completing some coursework at UC Berkeley. And I had anytime I learn a new technical skill, because I'm not actually in the cannabis industry, I'm an IT guy by trade, IT finance. Um, so I start anytime I learn a new skill, I want to put it to practical use, right? I want to be able to do something cool that I find interesting, because if not, why the hell am I learning how to do this thing? So data science, right? Data science was a big, interesting thing for me, figuring out how to use large data sets to tell a story, figuring out what stories the data can tell. And I decided, well, I'm just learning how to do this stuff. I just became a patient in this medical program. It looks like there's some public data available. Let's do a couple of dry fire exercises, let's see what I can come up with here. And I started to find even more things that I was confused about, that I started asking questions about. And eventually that led to sort of an opening of Pandora's box, and there was no coming back from it at that point. Once I realized that there were things going on that I would consider to be rising to the level of criminality. Now, again, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not in a position to say whether or not something is a criminal act or not. But what I do know is that Connecticut touts the medical program as being authentically pharmaceutical and legitimately medical. And if the things that I was witnessing in medical cannabis here were to be happening in traditional medical clinical contexts, there would be heads rolling. There would be massive news coverage of it. There would be scandals as the day is long. Um, and I was trying to figure out, well, why not? If we're really so gung ho on this being a medical program, then why are we not treating it as such? And why is the regulator not doing what they should be doing once it's been proven demonstrably that some of these conditions exist? So I don't want to get too far ahead of myself and speak in the abstract here, but basically what it boiled down to was that led to a bunch of actions that I took to try to democratize the information in and around the medical program, getting laboratory certificates of analysis. And again, shout out to Josh, shout out to Yasha, Chris at Pro Verde. I mean, the ones that are doing it right.
Chris
Uh,
Udala.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I I think the answer to a lot of these hypotheticals that I've been raising in this little monologue here lies with those folks.
Mm.
Being able to take the data and extrapolate from that data, this is the story that it's telling. This is what seems to really be going on, despite what somebody may be saying.
Yeah.
So I think that's really where things are headed at this point, because it's been made clear to us that there's no intent to kind of self police. There's no intent um, to do right by patients, frankly.
Mm.
So fast forward, here we are, 2024. It's a pivotal moment right now here in Connecticut, at least, and I think in the broader national context as well. There's a lot of change happening since the last time we spoke on the show, Caleb. There's been a massive change in the landscape nationally and regionally. So a lot of moving parts, a lot of things to keep track of, a lot of opportunities for grifting and corruption and malfeasance and fraud. And much like yourself,
Mm.
trying to get to truth on a lot of these things. I'm just seeking the truth and trying to get, a clear picture of what's really going on. And a
Mm.
lot of people have vested interests in preventing that from happening. But as long as there's people like you and me, people like Jamie, people, all all people, that you've had on the show and have been saying a lot of the same things. As long as there's people like that, Tess, working together to try to get this thing where it needs to be, I think there's hope. I think there is a degree of hope. but I also think it's going to require um, certain parties to humble themselves and look it in the face and be like, okay, yeah, this needs to be changed, this needs to be worked on. So right now where I'm at is I'm trying to get other people empowered to be able to do some of the same things that I've been doing in their own local markets in their own state. And if they want to start going down this path, I got a whole toolbox for them to use. So uh, that's I don't know if that counts as a life story, but hopefully that kind of sets the stage, sets the tone for the
That
conversation.
was, that was a tight 5 or maybe 6. And here we got David Offenhart's watching.
Yeah.
Dave, thanks for tuning in, man. And Rodney, here's Chef Rodney. What up, boys?
Yeah, yeah.
David said recreation killed the medical show, which I would agree with there, David. And here's KBH, save the terps. I don't know what the fuck that means, but yeah. So Lou, I'm putting you in the big box for the rest of this show.
Oh shit.
I rolled up a nice joint from my favorite legacy grower who no one is going to know about. Here we go. We got somewhat Cyclops. Oh, there we go. You're working Connecticut to get the data shared so people can analyze it is pivotal and so important.
Thank you, Jamie. Thank you,
Yeah.
Jamie. What up,
Yeah.
Bry?
And here's somebody else I don't know. Wait. Oh, there we go.
Infidel, yeah, is a
Yeah.
very, very old friend of mine. Thanks for watching, Brian. Appreciate it, buddy.
Word up. So Lou, what I'm going to do is relight this.
Do that. Enjoy that.
And I'm going
point me to some things to talk about and enjoy that.
I'm going to pull up this story because this is
All
what
right.
I brought you on for. And I want to thank you for being here again, man. I always enjoy our interviews. And so here's the story, man. This is from ctnewsjunkie.com. Connecticut hires first in the nation cannabis ombudsperson. This is from May 29th, 2024. The author is Brian Scott Smith. And I'm going to let you take this away because I know you've been working super hard on this. And I'd love for you to just walk us through exactly how this played out, man.
Yeah, no doubt. First of all, big thanks to Brian Scott Smith. As I tend to do, I came in a little hot with him. And, we were able to get it to a place where he understood where I was coming from. Um, and I'll just start with that, man. The reason I come in hot and people don't like my approach sometimes is years and years of gaslighting and deflection and misdirection and whataboutism and all the logical fallacies that come with people trying to avoid the truth being exposed. So at a certain point, I go right for the throat sometimes, and that's a character flaw perhaps,
Well,
but
and I've criticized you for that as well. You know?
yeah. I mean, I'm aware of it. It's just I'm about results. I'm about outcomes. You know what I mean? So sometimes I may not come in, a little bit too abrasive, a little bit too aggressive, or whatever. But then people want to turn that into something else that it isn't, and it really is just out of a desire to get to the truth on things. So back to your question, Caleb, about the ombudsman stuff. So around 2019 was the first time that I brought this up. I said, listen, we have a regulator for cannabis in Connecticut that handles both adult use and medical. That is the State Department of Consumer Protection, who's also in charge of regulating anything that the state regulates, whether it be alcohol, whether it be gambling,
So
anything.
like liquor and lottery stuff like that.
Yes, lottery too. So yeah, anything. They also ostensibly are trying to prevent, consumer fraud, with like telemarketers and shit like that. So, it's a big, big agency. And they were put in charge of cannabis. Unlike other states, there was not a dedicated commission or a newly created agency within state government. Have you tried turning it off?
Yeah, sorry, I had to slap that one up
Every
there.
day, man, every day. So it's interesting to see how they have handled their role as sort of the arbiter and the caretaker of the cannabis industry here. And it's been very clear to me from the beginning of when I first got involved that their allegiance is apparently first and foremost to the 4 incumbent licensed producers who control basically 100% of the supply chain still. I mean, we've had a couple of new.
Still, we
Yeah, I
talked.
mean, we have
I know we talked about that before, but is that still the situation in Connecticut?
far and away, there are new producers who have brought, product to market here, but it is a drop in the bucket compared to um, the big four, the cartel, as I call them. Um, so they pretty much run the show. They get to dictate what happens in terms of public policy, in terms of regulation, in terms of enforcement. They have a very strong and coordinated lobbying presence that they are not afraid to wield aggressively in protection of their own financial interests, in service to protecting their market share. Now, what does that mean in practice? It means that what happens when a patient has a problem? What happens when I open up a container that I bought at the dispensary and there's mold inside or a bug or something like that? It means, well, you're supposed to report it. You're supposed to jump through the hoops, report it to the regulator, and they're going to make sure that it gets taken care of. But what I think myself and a lot of other patients found out the hard way is that when you jump through those hoops and you go through those proper channels, you end up with your question or your complaint just going away. It's like you never said anything. You might get like a perfunctory kind of reply, like a form letter response, but the staff who are dedicated to that function are not solely dedicated to that. They have other stuff they're trying to manage that they're in charge of. And the biggest allocation of drug control agents in Connecticut is around enforcement more than anything else. There's existing law and regs here that have simply not been enforced, which has allowed for a lot of really, frankly, shitty behavior, including but not limited to the secret collusion to increase the allowable total yeast and mold count for medical
Right,
cannabis.
which was something we talked about last time for sure, and in your
Yeah,
fourth
yeah.
request to expose that.
So when you have free reign to basically do whatever you want and realize that you're not going to face any kind of consequences or accountability for it, they really thought they could just shoot an email over from the lab to the regulator and be like, "Hey, you mind if we crank this up by 2 orders of magnitude? We have an audit coming up. We just want to make sure everything's copacetic." And they think that they can do that and get away with that. And under normal circumstances, they would. They would have gotten away with it too if it wasn't for this meddling kid. I'm saying though, you got to pull the mask off these mother. So
I was gonna say it. Thanks for doing that for me.
so it became clear to me they're not going to act right. They're not going to do what they're supposed to be or what they should be doing for patients. So how do you counter that? How do you make a move against that when the entity that's charged with public safety and compliance and enforcing, safe practices among these producers is in bed with them and is clearly just going to do whatever they want to do and, screw everybody else. So, yeah, Scooby Dooby Loo. At least we know we don't have to pay the state every year for.
Yeah, I'm just slapping comments up. Yeah,
No, that's
thanks.
cool. I like it. Please. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So in civics in school, you learn about the Constitution, you learn about American governmental systems, what is American democracy supposed to look like, or what is our constitutional republic supposed to look like in terms of how it operates. And one of the key things that the founding fathers decided it was going to be a a way to keep the train on the track is checks and balances, right? You can't have any one part of government getting so powerful that they can just call all the shots and dictate what's going to be happening. There's other entities, in the three-tiered, the judicial, executive, and legislative kind of approach. They all sort of counterbalance each other and make sure that nobody's doing the wrong thing, or at least
Allegedly.
guide them. Yeah. I mean, that's how it's supposed to work, right? That's how it gets explained to us in school. So my thinking was, all right, let's take that and run with it. What if outside of DCP, the regulator, what if we had an agency or an individual who was deputized by the state to work on behalf of patients and put their concerns and their interests first? And I did a lot of research on this, and I tried to find, like, well, is there any state in America that's already doing this? And the answer was no. There is something in South Africa, believe it or not, that predates this idea. And that, I didn't really take anything from that other than the fact that, hey, somebody else had this good idea. It exists already. It proves that it can be done. Let's see if I can get that done here. Let's see if I can get an ombudsman, or as we're calling it now, ombuds person, to get created as a function of the state legislature and give patients at least a chance, at least a fighting chance. You know what I mean? Because right now they're like being dunked in the shark tank with their hands tied behind their back. They have nothing. They have no tools at their disposal for, protecting themselves, informing themselves, educating, communicating amongst themselves. They don't have a voice in their own program, right? Yeah.
And can I ask you, it feels to me like most of the medical patients are older folks. And maybe people that don't really know a lot about cannabis and so are getting bad advice.
Well, I can only speak for Connecticut here and what I've seen happen here. But when I first became a patient, I think we had in the high 50,000s in terms of registered medical patients, and now it's down to 40,000. And we went adult use in January of last year, January 2023. So I think a lot of the folks who still are patients do fit that description that you just said. And I think they either have never used cannabis prior, or have not used it in so long that they feel like they're completely out of the loop. And in that scenario, they are expected to trust the pharmacists who are embedded within the dispensaries. Even the bud tenders in Connecticut have to hold at least a pharmacy tech license. And that is somehow supposed to legitimize the authenticity of the medical program. Unfortunately,
I just interviewed Anthony Menini the other day too in Connecticut, who's a pharmacist with a weed license. So that was super interesting. Anyway, carry on, son.
Yeah, the whole pharmacist thing, a lot of them are actually in the same boat. A lot of them don't have any prior cannabis experience. They were employed by Walgreens or CVS or something like that, Rite Aid, and then they decided to come over to the cannabis side. And who are they learning about cannabis from? The producers, because of the vertical integration and because of the fact that the producers own much of the retail footprint in the state. They are basically indoctrinating the pharmacists with their way of thinking about cannabis. So when an older person, a patient with a legitimate medical condition, say they're immunocompromised or something like that, when they're going to talk to a pharmacist about cannabis, they're just getting a script that has been fed to the pharmacist by their employer. And the pharmacist goes against that script at their own peril. You don't want to go too far off the rails, because then you'll be considered, not a team player. And, your job may end up in jeopardy at that point. So there's a lot of folks who are patients who just have no choice but to take the pharmacist at their word. And why would they suspect that they're being misinformed or incompletely informed, or informed in such a way that normalizes things like remediation or the preemptive?
Don't jump the gun on that one yet. That's for the end.
Right. So, but you get what I'm saying. Like, when when your customer base is captive and you can't even they can't even know what the real strain name is of the product they're buying unless they go and check with their gatekeeper, their pharmacist, to tell them.
That was fucking stupid in Connecticut too, right? Like you have to
Still
name it
is. Still is.
27XR82 or something. Like that was stupid.
Yeah, I mean, it's so reminiscent of all the pharmaceutical, the drug company ads you see on TV, the names that they came up with for a lot of these strains. And it's sad too, because if you don't know the real strain name, you can't do any research on your own. You're just stuck with, I don't know, Sativerin Z5, whatever the hell this is. You have to get out the Rosetta Stone and translate it, and that I don't see how that benefits patients at all. All I see what that does is that's like job security for people who work at the dispensaries, because they're the holders of that knowledge, and you can only obtain that knowledge by seeking it through them. So again, it makes patients beholden to the whole infrastructure in the system. So
and you know, Lou, it was also sad to see some like Connecticut government officials getting involved in the cannabis industry down there.
we have
Mayor's wife of Stanford or something getting like social equity licenses. I don't remember the exact story, but
dude, it's a mess. Going all the way back to the inception of medical, State Senator Kevin Whitkos, who our friend David, who commented, is quite familiar with him. I think that's in his district. His wife was on the Curaleaf payroll and supposedly worked in a production facility. So what was she doing there? You know, what was the wife of a sitting state senator doing? Was she trimming? You know, was she sweeping up the floor and, you know, using the trim runs for distillate creation? You know, I'm just curious what a wealthy white woman was doing working in a production facility for Curaleaf. I'm curious if she ever actually set foot in the building, you know. So going all the way back to that, and then now all the way up to today, we have a former GOP state senator, Art Linares, who has a company called Rodeo Cannabis, or as a lot of the other producers have started to refer to it, First Rodeo, because apparently this is his first rodeo with cannabis. He's married to the mayor of Stamford, one of the biggest cities close to New York. And there's been a big enforcement in Stamford in conjunction with the attorney general against all the hemp-derived, intoxicating hemp-derived stuff. So, you know, anyone with eyes to see can see what's happening. I mean, I'd love to know how Art Linares was personally impacted and disproportionately impacted by the war on drugs. I would love to have that information. I have asked that question numerous times, but I've never gotten a straight answer. So people, and we also have the former commissioner of the regulator also got a social equity license. So it's like, you know, it's been, and we've talked about this at length before, and I'm going to get real steamed if I keep going down this path, but let's just say the intent of social equity here in Connecticut has been completely disregarded in favor of the state picking the winners and losers of, if we like you, and if you have connections, and if you have the clout, and if you've maybe made the right donations, you know what I'm saying? Then maybe you can get a cannabis license. But if you're just a regular person, you know, even if you were locked up for cannabis, you know, years ago, you know, good luck to you. We have a lottery system of which we've only ever had one round, despite the fact that we were supposed to have 2 rounds in 2022 alone. There has not been a second round of the lottery yet. And it's real confusing to me as to why. I just can't seem to figure it out. All right, get me back on track here, because I can talk about this all damn day.
Well, Lou, and also, you know, I've talked about this with some other guests. Like the lottery system, in my opinion, is a fucking joke, where people with more money can just kind of stuff the box.
Yeah,
is that accurate?
So we had a particular category of one license where over 10% of the applications were from the same person. You know, in the hundreds, in some cases in the thousands.
There was a news story about this, right, where they published the numbers. Was that Skyler guy?
Skylar at Hartford Business Journal. I do really love what he's been doing in terms of reporting, especially legislatively. This past legislative session that just ended here in Connecticut, there was almost no reporting at all on any of the cannabis stuff. And I get it; it's a short session. There's a lot of competing priorities. But even in the couple of years past, there was always something, Hearst would have written it up or somebody would have written it up. But in this one, Skylar was the only one who was consistently on it. So, but what that really just means is the people who were supposed to be helped by social equity are not the ones who are actually getting helped. And if you're just a regular person trying to get involved in the cannabis market, say you want to, you're a small craft producer, you have a farm like the fake one behind me here, something like that, you're out. You can't get in. You're boxed out by design, because who the hell are you? Have you donated to the right campaigns? Have you, made the right political connections? Have you greased the skids properly? If the answer is no, don't even bother applying, because you're out. You're not intended to get a license here. So the it's consistent with the mentality that we talked about in terms of keeping patients safe, and what the regulator is doing or not doing. It's all consistent with Connecticut is the nanny state that's really just still prohibitionist, even though we legalize. You go to any one of these planning and zoning meetings around the state and you just see so many people just complaining. Like, a lot of them think they're deciding on legalization right then and there. Like, the ship has sailed. You know what I mean? So Connecticut is just not a really conducive environment to small craft. We love to support our small brewers and distilleries, but we don't even have, craft producers able to get cannabis licenses.
Huh.
So back to the ombudsman thing, which I think is
Yeah.
where I jumped off the track
So
at some
for us,
point.
and I was gonna just start asking you about Aaron after you were done, but yeah,
Right,
let's go
right.
into that, please.
Yeah, so how that all started was, I talked about it for years. A lot of people were highly skeptical, thinking I was trying to create a job for myself. Why are you doing this? What the hell even is an ombudsman? And really all it is someone who's supposed to put the interests of their designated constituency ahead of, the corporate interests and that kind of thing. In this case, for patients, put the
Luke.
patient's needs.
Yeah, Luke. Sorry, Luke. Thanks for watching. Yeah, carry on, Luke. Sorry,
Right on, right on.
that's Luke from
So
Omerta. Yeah,
excellent. So a couple years back, I had a meeting with the Connecticut House Majority Leader, Jason Rojas, um, and pitched several ideas, one of which was the ombudsman thing. And he really seemed to gravitate towards that one. And it was a lot of back and forth. His senior policy counsel had connected with me at that point, and we were talking about, what should this look like in practice? Where the rubber meets the road. What is this person actually going to do? How are they going to be deputized to get things done for patients? Where are they going to exist in the broader scope of the state government? What agency are they going to be a part of? That kind of thing. And it was a lot of work to get it to a viable point, but it was a standalone bill to begin with. It got rolled into an omnibus bill that also had some other pieces that I was not crazy about. And I caught a lot of heat for that too, as if I was responsible for those pieces as well. No, just the ombudsman piece. That's all I was ever pushing for. It's all I've ever pushed for is for patients. I'm not in the industry. I'm not trying to make a buck here. I'm just trying to get somebody in position to help these folks after I'm out of the picture. So it got passed into law. It was signed by the governor about a year ago. Originally, it was supposed to be stood up and running by October of last year, but state government is a labyrinthine beast, and
a bitch.
it took much longer to actually get done. In March of this year, I was approached by the Office of the Healthcare Advocate, who is ended up being where the position resides within state government. Now, Office of the Healthcare Advocate in and of itself is pretty interesting, because that was created in the same way that this ombudsman office was, by a bill that created what was originally known as the Office of the Managed Care Ombudsman, which morphed into the healthcare advocate. So I think it makes a lot of sense to put this position within that vertical. And it turned out to be one of the best suggestions I made, because there was a lot of attempts to derail this thing along the way. But back in March, I got asked to be part of the hiring committee, along with representatives from the House Majority Leader's office and the governor's office, and some folks from the healthcare advocate. And it was just like any other hiring process I've ever been a part of, for work or anything like that. You look at a whole pile of resumes and you try to distill it down, who is going to be the most capable of executing on this in accordance with the original vision, based on the stack of applications that we've got here. And that was quite a process. It was a lot of back and forth, a lot of discussion, a lot of trying to, avoid attempts to position certain applicants who I personally did not think were best suited for the role as front runners. I can't really say a whole lot beyond that. There was just, I'm very glad that I was involved in the process. Let's put it that way, because it's the kind of thing that if it went wrong and the wrong person ends up in this role, you might as well not even do it at that point, because they're just going to be complicit with what's been happening. They're not going to push, they're not going to rock the boat, they're not going to make change on behalf of people. They're just going to continue to have the playing field laid out in service to the people who are currently enjoying the dominance and the power that they have in the industry here. So
You beat me to my next question too, you cocksucker. So I'm really hoping, and Aaron, if you're watching, I know she's probably super busy, but I'd love to have Aaron on the show and just talk to her about the direction of this, because dude, it seems like you've been working on this for a very long time, and as someone who plays a lot of long games, dude, it must be nice to see some of your work coming to fruition here, Lou.
it is, man. It's been about 5 years, and it's been about 2 years of real, once that connection was made with the legislature, of really grinding to get this done. And there's so many moving parts to it. It's getting the bill written, it's getting the bill passed into law, it's the whole application and hiring process, and ferreting out, who's going to really rise to the top in terms of who we're going to pick to do this thing. I always said from the beginning, I wish I had an attorney to work with. I can't afford to hire an attorney to work on cannabis stuff. But now the whole state has one. Now the whole state has an attorney whose entire job is just to protect medical cannabis patients from the horrible things that are happening right under all of our noses, that we're not even really allowed to talk about publicly. Certainly, the dispensary owners won't acknowledge any of these things publicly. They don't want to create a crisis of confidence in the program. They don't want to impact their own sales and whatnot. So they would rather have people buying than have people be safe. And I don't think I'm stepping out of line by saying that, because they demonstrated that when the whole mold issue first got exposed at the end of 2021. Everyone says, "Oh yeah, we're going to talk to our patients about it. We're going to inform them. We're going to educate them." Only one dispensary ultimately did that, and they did so in a way that was so weak, and it's all still safe, we promise, but there could be problems, maybe, we don't know. So finally, now we have someone who's not afraid. In her first week on the job, her second day on the job, Erin Gorman Kirk, by the way, fantastic person. Could not be happier to have her in this role. Her second day on the job, she was interviewed, and she shared a story with, I believe it was Brian Scott Smith, who was asking her, sort of about her own history. And she is a patient herself. That's another thing that I don't think a lot of people understand. She is a medical patient. She's a registered patient in the program. And in that article, she talked about how she had some adverse effects from consuming Connecticut medical cannabis. And as soon as she stopped consuming those products, the problems went away. And that's her sharing her own lived experience, her own life story. But she's already catching heat Oh, why would you say that? Why would you say something like that? Because it happened, and it happened to her. And she's simply telling her story of what happened to her. And she's got a lot more of those stories because she's also a caregiver for a lot of elderly patients, veterans, people who she works with on a daily basis who stand to benefit greatly from her being in this role and being able to go to bat for patients now. But I brought that up because she's not afraid. She is not afraid to tell it like it is and to put out there what a lot of us have been saying for years now and just getting dismissed as crackpots and keyboard warriors. Well, are you going to do that to her now too? Are you going to say that she doesn't know what she's talking about or her own life experience? You're going to tell her that it's not real, it's not valid. You're going to try to gaslight her. Come on. Like, let's get to the table and let's talk about these things instead of continuously trying to just deflect and sweep it under the rug. People aren't falling for it anymore. People aren't buying into that anymore. It's time to have real, straightforward, frank, and honest conversations about this stuff, especially with the broader scope of what's going on nationally, federally. There's going to be a lot of need to have real, authentic conversations that are not driven by people with profit motives and, commercial interests. There has to be representation of the patient and the consumer in these conversations, or why are we even doing this? Are we just going to create another massively corrupt national industry that's dominated by like 6 or 7 corporate boardrooms? Is that how we really want this thing to end up?
3. Usually it's 3, but yeah.
So yeah,
let me slap a comment, Lou. I hope this sets a precedent for other state medical programs to follow. Lots of work left to do. Appreciate all the hard work it took to make this happen for your state. Although my counterpoint would be that pretty much every state medical program has failed and has sold out to corporate interests, at least from the research that I've done.
Yeah. I mean, the way that has manifested here in Connecticut is good luck if you're a medical patient and you're trying to go to the dispensary and buy concentrates at this point, because all you're going to find is syringes full of distillate that are going to expire in like 2 weeks. And moon rocks. Apparently moon rocks are considered concentrates here now. It's completely ridiculous. Who's paying $50 a gram for moon rocks? Like, who? Tell me who. And when you can find rosin here, when you can find some hash, it's like absolutely ridiculous prices. Like $45 for a half gram. A half a gram. And that's when it's even in stock. So supply, quality, diversity of the supply chain, availability, you know, RSO went away for a long time, and I know a lot of patients rely on that here. It was just completely unavailable for a long period of time. All that does is that sends people to source elsewhere.
Maine,
It sends people to Maine, Massachusetts, hell, even Rhode Island. Rhode Island has medical reciprocity with Connecticut too, just like Maine. So if you bring your medical card to Rhode Island, you're not paying tax, and you have it's nowhere near Maine, but at least you have more variety and more, higher quality options available to you than if you're buying at your Connecticut dispensary. So it's been really sad, Caleb, as you said, to watch what happens to medical cannabis programs when adult use takes over. But
that was this other guy. I didn't know that was E.
Yeah.
But I do agree with that point for sure.
Yeah. So it's tough to watch. It's tough to watch as they try to funnel patients into the adult use market so that they can get the tax revenue, because ultimately that's what these states really care about, is how much tax revenue are we going to be able to skim off this industry that we hate, that we did not want to legalize in the first place. But we did it because you projected this massive windfall of tax revenue. So where is that money? Where is that revenue? Well, the problem is you gave the entire market away to 4 producers, and they all have quality control problems. They all have, in one way or another, they're irradiating, or they have other methods of, adulterating cannabis in a way that makes it inherently lower quality than something that you could find on the unregulated side or even in other states' regulated markets.
Oh,
Yes, sir.
okay.
You had a question.
Yeah, I just want to slap a couple comments here. It's Jamie again. One of the things I know from talking to several cannabis prescribing physicians is that they often recommend RSO, so its unavailability helps to clearly demonstrate marketplace priorities.
Yep. If the margins aren't there, it's not going to be a priority. If they can't, if they can't mark it up as much as they do flour, then they're not really interested. And especially another thing that I know Vermont also had struggles with is potency caps. That's what I keep hearing blamed for why there's no concentrate on the market here, is because they don't have a way to create like BHO or anything like that that's going to be below whatever that threshold is. Like, what are you going to use to fill the rest of that product? So what the producers and the retailers say now is that, oh, concentrates are not allowed. We're not allowed to sell you concentrates, which is a lie. They are allowed, but there's a potency cap, which basically makes it de facto impossible. But they won't say that because they're so incredibly terrified of pissing off the regulator and biting the hand that feeds them with the oligopoly that they have, that they will never say one bad word about the regulator. They will never point the finger at anyone who has helped them get the stranglehold on the market that they have today. So again, where does that leave patients and consumers? You're screwed. You know what I mean? The people who are supposed to be going to bat for you and helping you are actually just saying, oh, well, if you really if you really want concentrates, I guess you should write a letter to your congressman, kind of thing. Like, we're not going to help you with that. We're not going to lobby for that. Instead, what they lobby for is continuing to restrict access to the market. And in some cases, what the thing that's going on with hemp beverages right now is another really interesting thing to follow.
That's going to be another show, though.
Yeah, the strength of the lobbying efforts. And not just from the cannabis lobby either, the package store lobby down here. That's what we call the liquor store.
Packies.
Yeah,
I went to college in Massachusetts. I know words.
I mean, I know you have a very broad audience. I got to make sure that they understand what I'm talking about when I say a package store. We're not talking about the container store here. We're talking, package store is a store that sells alcohol.
Can I slap another comment up here? This is
absolutely.
From SM. Yeah. All the Connecticut influencers who need to make content are who's buying moon rocks, and they all buy it gladly and make YouTube videos of themselves reviewing the product and promoting the producer.
Oh man, ain't that the truth? Ain't that the truth? We have some cheerleaders down here. We have some straight up cheerleaders who they're consumption advocates, man. What that means is they make videos of themselves consuming these products and they post them on social media, and they sit back and wait for the likes to roll in. I mean, what are you really doing? What is that really accomplishing? All you're doing is you're basically a free street team for the MSOs at that point, and you get a kickback in the form of some bunk ass product that nobody wants to buy anyway. Sales have been down. Sales in April, based on the publicly available data, April is a month historically, with the 420 holiday and all that, is supposed to be a big money maker for cannabis, right? A lot of people are buying, right? So for Connecticut, the revenue was actually down in April. And there were 2 months prior where it was the same thing. And, nobody wants to know why. And if you ask why, it's, oh well, we just don't have enough producers. We don't have, we need to get more of the big producers online. And as if one or two of these giant cultivators is going to swoop in and save everything. You need more diversification in the supply chain. You need those small craft producers. You need the folks who actually give a shit about quality and care about the craft of what they're making. That's when you're going to start seeing a lot of tax revenue coming in. If I could go down the street to Rise or whatever the hell it's called now, and I could buy something high quality for a reasonable price, I would do that all day, every day. But I can't, so I don't. And that means my money and a lot of other people's money does not go into that tax revenue bucket. It goes somewhere else.
To Maine.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it goes to a large, increasingly diverse number of options for folks who are just fed up with what's on offer around here.
Can I slap a couple questions
Please
up
do.
there?
Yeah,
This
yeah.
is from Rodney. And Rodney, if you're listening, please. He said, so wouldn't social equity in these states that do the fake ass lotteries, isn't that a RICO? I'm not sure exactly what you're asking there, Rodney, but if you're still listening, please clarify. Some of this stuff does seem odd to me, the interstate, like the government's collecting money off of sales of cannabis, even though it's still a controlled substance federally.
Selective enforcement and cherry picking what to enforce based on who benefits from that enforcement. And it's really sad to watch, especially our attorney general here, William Tong. He is so ready to be like the vicious attack dog on the sesh, the unregulated event, where people are selling, middlemaning main product and whatnot. I get it. It's not ideal, but like, let these people live. Let them do what they're going to do. If you're not going to give patients and consumers viable options on the legal regulated side, then at the very least, don't arrest and harass them for getting it where they can. You know what I mean? I've never understood that. I've never understood why that's a priority until I look at something like Stanford, where there's a former state legislator married to the mayor who is also a licensed producer, who has a market to control, who, that's where the attorney general lives. So you just call them up. Hey, do you think we could have a press event where we have the table of all the products that we seized from this gas station, and then we talk about, how we're keeping everybody safe, because it's not lab tested. If it was lab tested, that would be one thing, but if it's not lab tested, that means it's not safe. And people buy into that mentality too. The whole like lab testing as a pillar of the regulated cannabis industry. People have completely bought into that. And that to me is one of the saddest things, because folks who are supposed to be men and women of science, who are supposed to put truth and accuracy first, have completely dropped the ball here and bought into that same green rush mentality, that greed mentality. The lab that I got shut down here, I had an hour-long call with the director of that lab, who then threatened to sue me if I released the recording of the audio. Now, I didn't have to release the recording. All I had to do was use public data to prove what the guy was doing. And then they mysteriously lost their license and shut down last year. So, I don't have to do those things. I give them enough rope, and they're more than willing to hang themselves. And I did it once. I'll be happy to do it again. I see we have another lab coming into the state, it seems like. Certain lab from Massachusetts that I'm not going to name, but they've been hawking me on LinkedIn, looking at my profile, seeing what I'm speaking about. So I'm sure they're shaking in their boots too, and rightly so, because if you're doing wrong things, you're going to get called out. You're going to get, put on blast. And now we have an ombudsperson who is, formally in that role. So it's not just going to be me. It's not going to be some rando yelling on the internet about it to a small echo chamber of people. It's going to be a state official who's calling you out on this kind of stuff. So this should serve as a wake-up call to everybody in the cannabis industry in Connecticut. The party's over in terms of doing whatever you want and not being held accountable. The party is over. It's time to start doing right. And if you're not doing right, you're going to be held accountable. And there's going to be hell to pay, because Erin is not here to play, and she is not trying to be all touchy-feely with the industry. She's not an attack dog, but at the same time, she's not going to stand for this kind of stuff. So that's why I'm happy. I don't want to really necessarily do that kind of stuff anymore. I don't want to be the one who has to constantly be ringing the alarm bells and pointing at things and saying, hey, if you're paying attention, you should care about this.
You've done a lot, Lou, and I know you've also been subjected to some pretty severe personal attacks too, which I can relate with. So
yep.
I appreciate your work. I got one more question for you here, and then I got to get out of here. I got to go see my mom, Lou. Yeah. Oh, and
Love
that's
this
my
man.
sister calling
Love
me
it.
right now. She's up here. So I'm going to see my family. The last question I want to ask you about, Lou, is about, and I got this interview with Rad Source on the 6th. So I'd like to ask you about remediation and how you feel like that ties into this whole story with medical patients, please.
Yeah. For people that don't know what remediation is, it's kind of become like an umbrella term. When I say remediation, what I'm talking about is any adulteration of the plant pre or post harvest that is not required to grow it. You know what I mean? It is something beyond the normal growing process. If that is happening, I am of a mind that it should be proactively disclosed, no matter what it is, no matter at what point along the process it's happening. If you're spraying, if you're irradiating, if you're using ozone, which fewer and fewer people are these days, if you have some other method that you're using to try and compensate for flawed SOPs that allow high microbial activity in the first place, or IPM, uh, you're not taking care of pests in a way that would have prevented some of these problems, then you have to rely on something like irradiation to take care of it for you. If you're doing that, you should be disclosing that. And it should not just be some generic sign at a dispensary, which is what they passed here in Connecticut in last month when the session ended. It should be on the product label, and it should be on a per product basis, not even a per SKU basis, but an individual product. If this product has been irradiated at any point in time, if this was food and beverage, like federal regulations, the FDA requires a certain symbol to be present on the product label to disclose to consumers this product has undergone irradiation so that they can make an informed and educated decision about what they're buying and what they're putting into their bodies. I'm not saying you have to stop doing whatever you're doing. If that's what you have to do to be able to pass lab testing, I feel for you, you know, but you still got to admit that you're doing it, and you still got to inform people, and you still have to disclose it.
Yeah.
So
And,
what I say it go
well,
ahead.
one of the counterpoints I would make there is that some of the lab testing standards do seem a little
Oh yeah,
ridiculous.
yeah, they're fucked. Yeah. Yeah. No
And that's,
doubt.
and that's
And
yeah,
I know
Carrie,
the outdoor folks have a ton to say about that. And that when I talk about conversations that need to happen, Caleb, where we're having authentic and honest conversations, that's one of the biggest ones, because the way that the lab testing is set up right now is ripe for gaming. It is ripe for abuse by bad actors, and it also puts people who are trying to do right in a very difficult position if they want to be compliant. So
uh,
I don't even remember who originally said it, but it when you pass a lab test, it doesn't mean that the product is safe. It just means that it's compliant. And
I
that's
believe, I
where we're
believe
at
maybe
right now.
Tess said that to me one time.
Yeah, I think that was a Tess quote. Shout out to
Casey
Tess,
Tess,
the
dude. Yeah.
patron saint of all this stuff. Like, so much knowledge she has imparted unto me about
Yeah.
this that I would not know otherwise.
And you know, Luke, what I want to ask you is, and I'm going to ask Rad Source this on Thursday. This is one of the big questions about remediation. It's like, okay, so let's say you take a big fucking chunky nugget and you run it through a Rad Source machine. Yeah, maybe it kills all of the mold that's growing, but maybe there's still some materials stuck onto the flower like, that doesn't come off during that process.
Yeah, endotoxins, that's a big one. That's one of the things that I want to be doing some round robin off the shelf testing. I want to be doing endotoxin testing. I want to look at things like microbial skeletons, what's left behind. Just because you irradiated doesn't mean you scraped it off. It's all still there. It's just like not in the same state of thriving that it was before. And that's not even to say if product is not dried and cured properly and stored properly at retail, that environmental conditions can allow mold to be created after it's been packaged. So you know it's tough to keep track of all these things, but at the end of the day, it's vital. It's vital for this industry to continue as a going concern, because the path that it's on right now, And this whole notion of just like, if somebody has a question or a problem, just brush it aside, just assume that we know what we're doing and let us do our thing. That's not gonna, it's not sustainable. And you are not going to be here in a year, Acreage Holdings and others, if you can't make these kind of changes. I don't know if you saw their financial statements that they just reported. They said themselves they don't know if they're going to be able to survive another 12 months. So that's the botanist here in Connecticut. You know, it's going to be happening.
I had to mute
Charles
myself.
Alcar predicted this. He said,
Charles,
yeah,
I
he
hope
said that
Charles is
there's going to
watching,
be
man.
a day of reckoning. There's going to be a day of reckoning where a lot of these players are just going to have to finally either shut down or consolidate. And it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if Canopy Growth is invested in you or not. You're not Wana. You know what I mean? You're, you know, you're a bunch of finance guys that started a cannabis company. So you can keep
love
it up
Charles.
as long as you want, but understand what's going to happen. And the alternative is to come to the table with people like Aaron, people like me, people like you, Caleb, who actually have sort of the voice of the people and the people's interest in mind, and start building from there. Because if you're going to continue to box out those voices, it's ultimately going to hurt you in the end. And more importantly, it's going to hurt patients and consumers in the end. So that's what I would say in response to that. You heard,
Fuck
man?
yeah. Fuck yeah, Lou. I think I'm about out of shit here. I want to leave you a little minute. If there's anything we forgot that you think is super important, or if you have any shameless plugs or shout outs, now's the time.
Yeah.
Everybody watching, it's Lou Rinaldi. He's a patient advocate in Connecticut. Please, and I posted our last couple interviews on LinkedIn if you guys want to check those out too. Thanks for being here, Lou. I really appreciate your time today.
Thank you, Caleb. I do have one point that I want to make. You know, there is both micro and macro. There's a lot of infighting going on among advocates, and I think a lot of that has been engineered by people who benefit from having us fighting and being at each other's throats rather than actually getting shit done. I'll share a personal story, and hopefully, it's inspiring to some people. Um, you know, Aaron and I did not always get along. We were at odds for quite a while, and it took me kind of humbling myself and reflecting on, well, what am I really trying to do here? You know, I have this tagline, improving patient outcomes. Is what I'm doing right now really in service to that? And when it became clear to me that she was a candidate for the ombudsman position, I had to kind of just check myself and be like, listen, whatever petty beef and bickering I have going on is way, way less important than making sure the last 5 years of my life in this project comes to fruition and gets done the right way. So at a certain point, you got to put your pride on a shelf and you got to focus on what really matters. And for me, that meant checking myself, checking my ego, thinking about what's really important, and then trying to build a bridge. And thankfully that worked out. You know, I want to give a big shout out to Nikki Lawley in New York, who served as kind of the go-between in those early days when I realized, listen, Aaron is best positioned to be in this ombudsperson role, and it's time for me to just stop worrying about what, if I could even remember why I was mad in the first place. It's time to put all that shit on a shelf. And I hope that, you know, the example of that can be blown out and expanded to anybody, you know, in Connecticut, but also nationally. I think a lot of bad actors have benefited from infighting and by creating hostility where it doesn't necessarily need to exist. And if you're thinking about a relationship that you have with someone that maybe you used to rock with and you're not really cool with them anymore, and you used to get good things done by working together, and now you're just kind of both like taking shots at each other, just check that. You know what I mean? Humble yourself, check your ego, think about what you're really trying to achieve and what you're really working for. So I would say at this point that I'm going to declare like an amnesty, you know, for anybody that I've ever historically had an issue with. As long as your head and your heart is in the right place, let's talk. You know what I mean? Let's build. I may not agree with what you're doing, and you may not like what I have to say about it, but that doesn't mean we can't work together in a way that's going to push this thing forward in the interest of people, in the interest of patients and consumers over the corporate interests, the finance bros, the tech bros, the corrupt politicians, any of that. So if there's one closing, thought that I could share, it's that, it doesn't happen if people like me don't start talking about it in these terms, and it's tough. I get that it's tough for a lot of people. It's like Marcellus Wallace said about pride, the night of the fight, you may feel a slight sting. That's pride, You got to get over that. You got to get past that. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Pride never helps. It only hurts. And that's real.
I'm going to bring myself back up here. I want to thank you so much for your time today. This has been a fantastic interview. I'm going to wrap it up here. If you got nothing left, stick around for a minute. I'm going to do my outro and we're going to get out of here.
Yeah, man. Hey, thanks for everybody who tuned in. I appreciate you taking time out of your Sunday. I know it's a gorgeous day out there. I'm about to get out there myself, but I hope you all have a great rest of your day. And please continue to support Caleb and what he's doing here. It is so vital and it is so incredibly important. So thanks again, Caleb. Thanks to all your viewers. And we'll see you next time.
Yeah. Peace, guys. I'm Caleb Pesky. That's Lou Rinaldi. The devil's in the details, and the details are in the fine print. Peace, guys.
Yep.